Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast. Presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh from MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is Adam Austin. He is the owner and driver of the Shootout Showstopper, the 4B11 Miata. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing good, Josh. How are you?
I'm great, man. This car was causing quite a stir. I think a lot of people I talk to say, hey, did you see that 4B11 Miata? Or what kind of engine does that Miata have? So you guys definitely created quite a monster here.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm driving around in the Shootout, and everybody keeps seeing the little diamonds on the front of the car, and they're like, everybody, hey, has that got a 4G in it? I'm like, no, it's got the better one.
So tell us about the setup on your 4B11 Miata.
So it's a little silly. It's a no holds barred. I mean, it's a dart and sleeved, fire ringed 4B11T, the diamond pistons, Cowleys and Forcers, Kelford C cams. It's got a Magnus dry sump in it. I got a 62 millimeter turbo from Tyler Gennari at AGT. Got two big old Hellcat fuel pumps in it. Massive custom Garrett intercooler core that we put together. 42100 cc injectors. I mean, it's got all the fuel. We got together a custom clutch from X Clutch to mount up for the space plated T56, which I put the S1 sequential shifter on it, so it's a sequentially shifted T56. It's got a 8.8 Cobra rear end in the rear, so it's still IRS with some drive shaft shop axles.
Nice.
I mean, we were tired of breaking stuff on cars, so we decided let's make this thing ready for 1,000 horsepower and put it in a 2,000-pound car and
For sure.
see what it does.
I mean, that's really why the Evo 10 doesn't get as much love. I feel like we just haven't figured out the drivetrain components yet, and some of it I'm not sure there is any figuring out too.
Right. I mean, it's just so hard to push power through a transverse transmission.
Right.
Like making things change directions inside of a transmission just doesn't work so much.
And you know, the one that you would think would be the most susceptible to taking on so much power, the double clutch transmission, it's really not the option that we thought it was going to be when it was first released.
Yeah, I mean, those things are sick and wild, but for a 500 horsepower car, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting millisecond shifts and whatnot, but I mean, when you're trying to actually start making some real power, it gets wild.
Yep. So, you know, you talked about the better version of the 4G63. What was it that made you guys use the 4B11 and not the 4G63?
So, the original setup in the car that I had was a Flying Miata 2-liter stroker kit. And so it was originally a Miata motor when I met the guys at Exigent, and we pushed that motor pretty hard, and it finally let go. And we kind of stood around. And we're like, well, what are we gonna put in this thing? And originally we said, let's just put a K-swap in it because that'd be easy, and it's been done, and there's kits for it, and we'd been done in a couple months probably, if not less.
Yeah.
And we're like, that'd be neat, but we're like, that's not kind of what we focus on at Exigent. Like we've built K series motors before, but we haven't built 1,000 horsepower K series motor. But we have built 1,000 horsepower 4Gs or 4Bs. So originally we're like, let's put a 4G in it. Like that makes sense. And really, it kind of the whole point was, I mean, the first setting factor was Ryan was pulling his motor out to get ready to build a brand new setup in his shop Evo X.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a great motor. I mean, it needed refreshed, but I mean that motor made 850 on a Mustang dyno before he pulled it out.
Mm-hmm. And made numerous hits throughout the year.
Right. So like that wasn't a bad motor.
Right.
And it was also it's the motor of the future, I think, for Mitsubishi, because of the fact that there's so many cars now that have that motor in it, that just like the 4G back then had, but you can't go to Mitsubishi now and say, hey, I want to buy a brand new 4G63 motor.
Right.
Where you can go to Mitsubishi now and say, hey, I'll take a brand new 4B11. They're like, all right, cool. Hand over $5,000 and brand new, never touched. Like,
yeah, there's definitely something to be said about, obviously the 4B11 T doesn't come in any current car, but the fact that they will still sell you one is pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know why really the 4B got such a bad name. Like, I don't want to say a bad name, but everybody thinks the 4G is so much better, and I get it that there's way more 1,000 horsepower 4Gs in the world than there are 4Bs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just because there aren't that many people trying it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a newer thing that we've gotten figured out. I mean, yeah, you have to sleeve it. You have to do some angry studs and whatnot, but
because
I mean,
that was the setback for a while, wasn't it? The clamping issue.
Correct.
Yeah.
And yes, the 4G's already uses bigger studs than the 4B does, but like there aren't many 4Gs running around making over 1,000 horsepower that aren't half filled or full filled with concrete.
Right.
So like that's not a super reliable everyday situation where a sleeved, I mean, no 1,000 horsepower 4 cylinders an everyday motor, but it's
even more so on a 4G63.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're taking water capacity away from it for cooling. Like at the end of the day, I mean, you put a sleeve motor in a 4B, it's still, everything's still there.
Yeah.
I mean, cooling's still going to be fine. It's going to run just like it did before.
I think for me, I know we're, I'm kind of pulling us off topic here, but for me, when I go to like IFO events or when I go to Import Alliance events, I see the 4G63s racing, or I shouldn't say the 4G63s. I see the Evo 8.9s racing, and I see the Evo 10s in the car show, and it kind of makes me frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I don't know if it's just because the 8.9's been around longer, and the people that have bought those cars have held on to them longer, and they've had the time to mess with them, and they decide, I'm tired of just looking at it. I want to actually drive it. But I think a lot of people get to see the Evo X as not like you've got all the people that say it's not a real Evo, and which it's a big car. I get it, but I don't know. It's just because it doesn't have a 4G in it. I don't think makes it not an Evo.
No,
it's just
I think it's worthy of
new.
the title. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why take this 4B11 and put it in the Miata platform of all things?
Well, Miata's always the answer. It's an acronym for a reason. But really, I was 10 years ago as a kid starting in the automotive world. I drove a Miata on a test drive, and thing like got loose, just like coming around a corner, like not trying anything, and I'm like, oh my, like that's an interesting new thing. And then started doing a little more research about them, and I'm like, oh, like these things come with double wishbone suspension all the way around, and like 50-50 weight distribution. Like these were built to be race cars from the factory. And come to find out, like you can get, like even with the factory motors in them, like doesn't take a whole lot to start making horsepower. And 300 horsepower in a 2,000 pound car is silly. So we can when you start looking at some of the things that the people have done with Miatas, even in the drag world. I mean, if you look at the top 10 fastest Miatas in the world, it's seconds faster than the top 10 fastest Evo X's, and almost faster than the top 10 Evos in general.
Wow.
I mean,
That must be crazy to go that fast in something with such a short wheelbase.
Right. I mean, to break into the top 10 quarter mile times in the Miata list, you're in the mid eights. And it's just wild.
And we're talking like LS swaps and 2JZ and stuff like that?
Yeah, and that's the wildest thing is like everything just fits in them.
Yeah.
I mean, so I stuffed that T56 in there and didn't cut anything. I had to bash on the firewall a little bit, but nothing a big old hammer couldn't fix. I mean, it slid right in there.
Good deal. Well, I mean, just looking at the 4B11 in the engine bay, it gives you the feeling like, man, this looks like it was easy, but I know it couldn't have been. So let's talk about the setbacks when it came to shoehorning that 4B11 and that big old T56 into the Miata.
Yeah, so there was two like pretty big things that we had to deal with, and when we started the build, we're like, okay, we knew we wanted to use the T56 to match with the 4B, and that was the hard part for us, was finding somebody to adapt the two to each other. I mean, we spent over a year talking to people, and everybody's like, oh yeah, that's no big deal, we could put that together for you, and give us a couple months. And finally we found somebody that like sounded serious, and like we built a pallet full of parts and sent it to them, and they're like, yeah, we'll have that done in 8 weeks. We're like, that sounds great. And 8 weeks come by, we're like, hey man, how's this going? And they're like, oh, we've moved shops and stuff, so it's getting a little delayed. And we're like, oh, okay. And so we talked about it for a while, and finally Exigent, we decided that we're like, hey, we want to make parts, not and make things, so we should have a CNC, and we got a killer deal on a CNC, and so we decided, hey, we can make our own adapter plate now. And I mean, probably it wasn't a couple weeks after we got the CNC up and running that we had our first prototype and slapped it on the engine and trans, and our off center was maybe like a couple thou off, so we made us another one, and it was, I mean, perfect. Couldn't get any better. And so we got that together, and once we started to slide it into the car, we saw the next big problem is the front sump on the 4B. So that became a problem when you start to sit it down, and this front sump sits directly on top of the steering rack. So that doesn't work, because now all of a sudden the engine's 10 inches sitting out of the engine bay. Mm-hmm. So original idea was like, that's fine, it's no big deal. We're going to push everything forward 10 inches, which wasn't ideal, like, because now we're pushing weight more and more forward, which is fine for a drag car, but I wanted to be able to use this thing for everything, autocross, drag racing, whatnot. And we're like, whatever, we'll deal with it. And then we came across the opportunity, because the dry sumps were hard to find at that time. We came across a Magnus dry sump, and they had one sitting on the shelf somehow.
Wow.
They're like, throw us the money, like, we'll have it here tomorrow. I'm like, awesome. So we're like, I guess let's pull this trigger. And so we got a dry sump, which made the motor severely shorter, and like from top to bottom. So now it sits directly across the power steering rack and everything, and slid in there. I mean, it's the only reason why it looks like it fits so well is because of that dry sump kit.
Oh wow!
But so we took advantage of, we moved the radiator forward and everything, and used all that room to fill up with the oil sump. But yeah, it looks like it's all meant to be there, but when you start looking a little further, it's pretty tight, and it works. I mean, that motor out in probably 45 minutes or less.
No kidding.
If you needed to.
Wow. So it's meant to be a race car now.
Yeah, there's nothing about it anymore that's not a race car. Everything's stripped out interior wise. It's got. I mean, we made some things to keep it street class legal. It's got door cards. It's got a dashboard. It looks finished inside, but everything is solid mounted. I mean, it's loud. It's noisy. It's a race car.
That's what we like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, Adam, could somebody just with basic tools do this swap in their garage? I mean, I know Exigent now sells the 4B11 to T56 adapter, so there wouldn't be a whole lot of fabrication, right?
So it's, I don't want to say nothing's impossible. It's, I mean, it all depends on your end skills, obviously. I mean, there's all kinds of wild builds that say they were built in their own garage and they're prototype level cars almost. And so anything's possible in your garage, but there's a lot of figuring out. And yes, we did a lot of the figuring out. I think there's probably an easier car to put the 4B in. I couldn't tell you what it is, but probably something that maybe the steering rack is in the back, not the front, is probably the number one thing you'd want to look out for if you were trying to put a 4B in something.
Mm-hmm.
Just for now, if you're putting a dry sump in the car, sure, put it in whatever you want. But it's all could be done for much cheaper, probably. You're just not going to have a full-blown race car. I mean,
right.
But I mean, heck, if you put a stock build, I mean, stock 4B11 with a turbo on it in a Miata, it'd still be probably the wildest thing most people have ever driven.
And probably be great in the turns.
Right. So it can all be better. But it's I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to tell somebody that, yeah, go ahead and jump in your garage and do it, just because I know how much effort and work it took us to do it.
Right.
But yes, doing it all over again, it wouldn't take us half the time because we figured everything out the hard way. And so yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I don't want to say no. I don't want to push anybody away from the idea. I want to see more 4Bs go into rear-wheel drive cars.
For sure.
Like, looking at the 4B11 list, I mean, I looked pretty far down the list, and I don't think there's anything other than an Evo X besides my little Miata 4B list.
I think you're right. I think the first time I saw your car at the Exigent shop, I was like, man, I'm going to start looking for those old Mitsubishi Mighty Max pickups and put a 4B11 in one of them.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we need some more, especially with the adapter available now. It just takes a lot of the headache out of it.
Yeah, I mean that's the hardest part of it. And yes, we could have used a 350Z transmission or something and made it cheaper, a BMW transmission, but we saw that the T56 is a factory rated 1,000 horsepower transmission. I mean, there's guys. The Granus Supra uses almost identical transmission that I'm using. Makes 2,500 horsepower. They probably will make for a cheaper option transmission.
Mm-hmm.
But for right now, it's for somebody that, if you're willing to go through this much work, you're probably wanting to make something really rad.
You probably need something serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Adam, what was this little yellow Miata like when you first bought it?
Well, so there was two versions of this poor car. The original car Miata that I bought almost 7 years ago was a 94 Miata that was built by Flying Miata out in Colorado. It was a special car, and unfortunately, I wrapped it around a big box van.
Ooh.
So took everything out of that car, and I found the car that I have currently, which is a 91. It was some kid had it for $1,000, and it had a blown up motor in it. And I'm like, I need something to stuff all this stuff into, and so I got it, put it all together, and I drove it like that for a couple years. And I mean, it was a 12-second car as it was then.
No kidding.
And I mean, which is silly for a Miata, but so yeah, it was. I mean, it was a nice car when I got it. I mean, but it was 120,000 miles. That, I mean, some kid painted in his backyard. It's not perfect, which was almost better. So like the original car was gorgeous. I mean, it was somebody professionally painted it, and it had like 40,000 miles on it. Like, it was a super nice car, but I was terrified of like rolling the fenders or cutting it up at all, like
Right.
to make it into a race car. So getting a hold of this 120,000 mile plus car that's seen a thing or two, like, didn't feel halfway near as bad about chopping the front off or cutting the fenders out to fit giant 12 by 11 or 15 by 12 wheels underneath it. Like,
Kind
so
of
it's
took all the guilt away.
yeah. I mean, it was a blessing in disguise, but it was a really nice car that I felt really bad about wrecking.
Awesome. This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by 3SX Performance. Since 1999, 3SX Performance has been the world's premier source for everything Mitsubishi 3000 GT, GTO, and Dodge Stealth. They have proven what they sell by building and tuning their 3SX cars in-house, which at one time held the world record in drag racing for the NA and TT, both front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. Check out their products and services at 3sx.com. So I know even now, it's not like this car just goes and sits and people can admire with the hood open. This is a full-on race car that gets used. So what type of racing do you plan to do with this car?
So the whole design of the car was a do it all. Like, we drag racing, obviously, but if we wanted to make it a dedicated drag car, we probably would have put a straight axle under the back end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to do autocross with it, and that's probably, I mean, that was always the original plan for the car, was to be a monster autocross car. And it's right now it's set up to run XSB, which is Extreme Street, and then the B is just for the weight class. This was for SCCA, and which right now nobody's really taking advantage of the rules, and because the rules really are very open. I mean, my car fits in it, so they're very open rules. But so we want to do autocross with it, and eventually down the road we want to do some time attack. But
Oh, nice.
for now, it's an autocross drag race car. I mean, it needs a little work in the autocross department right now, but I mean, I only got to do the autocross once at the shootout, and it did all right. But we need to figure out some weight bias and stuff. And I mean, the car had only been running for 2 days before we took it to the shootout.
That's right. I remember you guys saying that now.
Yeah. So but I mean, we also ran for 2 days, and it went a 10 that weekend. So twice.
And didn't really have to work on it at all.
No, yeah. I mean, we had one little hiccup. I think we had an oil line come loose and spill a little oil, but I mean, tighten that up, filled up the oil, and I mean, that was the only thing. I ran out of gas at the starting line.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah. I mean, it's a ground up build. You're gonna run into some hiccups here and there, especially with no time to find those problems. But yeah, man, we want to do it all with this car. We want to go do drag and drives. I think my dream would be to take it to do a drag and drive and one lap of America in the same summer.
Heck yeah.
I mean, like, So do road course stuff, drag racing. I mean,
So I want to see. I want to see this thing at Grid
do.
Life.
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked to the guys. The Slip Angle podcast even dropped the name about the 4B11 swap Miata for a second.
Heck yeah.
I mean, it's getting around, and I hope to get it out there to those events and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And that way, because kind of the bad part, Adam, which I know you and I and Glenn have talked about this. It sucks because it's like we want to let Miata people know that this is available, but this is such a small number of Miata people who are going to want to take on something like this.
Yeah, I mean it's wild because there's so many of the K series out there, the K swaps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I bet there's hundreds of them now, if not thousands, and they did a really good job of making it available, but everybody thinks that's a super cheap swap too, and like in the grand scheme of things, when you get right down into it, I mean, I bet you could probably put a 4B into it for the same price, but it's probably not going to be. I mean, there's people putting K's in them just to drive them,
right?
I mean, like we're doing it to make race cars.
And Adam, one thing that I forgot earlier, I was wondering this: is there any difference if someone was swapping this into the, is it called an NB chassis or the newer one?
So yeah, so you've got the NA, the NB, NC, and now the ND.
Oh, okay.
The NB would be exactly the same thing almost.
Okay.
If not, you'd have a slightly a little bit more amount of room. The frames, the frames swap over directly. The NB's is a slightly better chassis for kind of the stuff that I want to do, unfortunately, because there's more room for wheels and tires and whatnot.
Okay.
So, but I mean, the world's fastest Miata is still an NA, so it's not impossible.
I think it's the pop-up headlights.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we talked about originally when we started putting it together. We're like, well, let's just chop the front half off, and I'm like, what are we gonna do about these pop-up headlights? We're like, okay, we'll leave it alone.
You gotta do the Miata wink and then keep it like that all the time.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean, we took it back to the drag strip for the first time at our local track, and the shutdown on it doesn't have any lights. So we're like, all right, well, I didn't have the headlights wired up yet, so I have to like manually run them up and turn the lights on. I'm like, well, I don't want both headlights on for a drag pass, and I'm like, so I'll leave one up so I can see at the back half.
There you go. So, Adam, you think looking back at it, if you could start all over and do this build the same way, you would do everything? You wouldn't change anything?
No, not. I don't think I would. The only thing I could really change is maybe start with a nicer car. We love the idea of the ND Miata, the newest Miata. We looked around for a second because those things there's some auction cars coming around that I think that would be awesome. I mean, those things are just as light now as the NA Miata. But yeah, I mean, but the build overall, I mean, we cut no corners really. I mean, that car is ready for 1,000 horsepower minus some fuel, but everything else about it, the rear end, the transmission, the engine, everything about it says, give me 1,000 horsepower.
Hell yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready for 1,000 horsepower, but the car's pretty much ready for 1,000 horsepower.
I just looked at ND Miata up. Oh, yeah, you guys got to get your hands on one of these things. Holy cow.
God, dude, they're so pretty.
Especially with that hardtop on.
Yeah.
So, Adam, what motivates you to keep pushing this car? I mean, you could have done that 10-second pass and been like, hey, I'm done with it. I'm retiring on top.
Right. I mean, I want to show off what the guys at Exigent can do. I mean, we've we put the shop Evo together, and we struggled a little bit with some drivetrain components and whatnot, but we need a platform that shows off what the engines are capable of, and not only that, but I mean what we're capable with our hands and knowledge. I mean that we put together a whole car that's never been done before, and I mean we figured out the adapter plates and all that stuff. I mean all the wiring harnesses and everything's been done in house. Like I want to show off what those guys can do. I want to be able to show off what Tyler's little turbo can do. I mean, that thing's rowdy. I mean, we made 600 horsepower on 30 pounds, I think, in that car. And we're not even close to turned all the way up in it.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to kind of expand on what you were talking about, Adam. You guys at Exogen were, you know, before the shootout, you guys were really focused on customer cars. So when I came before the shootout to the shop, maybe like a month and a half, a month ago, this car didn't even have an engine in it yet.
Right.
So what you guys were able to do and get it finished, like you said, 2 days before the shootout, take it there and compete and race and have very minimal issues. I think that really that's got to be like, okay, yeah, we can really do this. We can push this car.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we knew we could do it, but it was well, like still focusing on customer cars, but I mean, for 3 months it was super late nights, and the last 2 weeks before the shootout, I think we put over 600 hours in it. The 2 weeks before the shootout, while still getting work done.
That's nuts.
I mean, it was the fact that it had those no problem. I mean, we were all waiting for something to go wrong, but it never did. And I mean, I drove the car home when we got it back, and I mean, the car is still in great shape. And even when we got it back, I mean, I loaded up the my drag slicks on the back of a little car trailer thing that I strap onto the back of the Miata, and we drove down to the track and went 10-1 that night, and put it back together and drove home.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Like it's a great car. Like, and everything about it it works. Like, can't complain at all.
Just like it's like a racehorse, just keeps it ticking and keep going.
Right.
So, Adam, what are the goals for 2024 with this car?
So 2024, I think. I mean, we were hoping to do it at the shootout, but we want to put the car into the top 10 quickest 4B11s. We're number 12 right now, I think. With our 10-1, we need to do like a 970, I think, to crack into the top 10. And I think it's more than capable. That 10-1 pass, I had to pedal it at the back half of the track. I think I'd probably have been there if I didn't have to. But I want it. We want to get in that top 10, and then I would love to go out to an autocross at our local, which is Cincinnati is one of the most competitive autocrosses in the country.
Oh, no kidding.
I would love to set a fastest time of the day at one of those events.
Heck yeah. Yeah, you got to hit me up whenever you're heading out to one of them. I want to see one of those in action. It's been a long time since I've watched autocross.
Oh, we'll get you out there. We'll put you in the passenger seat.
Except for at shootout, of course.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you come out to an autocross, we'll stuff you in the passenger seat, get you in a helmet, and
hell yeah,
we'll show you a good time.
I'm not sure two big guys is what you need for to set the fastest time of the day in a car.
Who knows, man? Maybe it'll set the bias off just right. Maybe we'll go faster. I'll just turn the power up a little bit.
There you go.
Right.
That's what we need. So, do you have any long-term goals for this car, Adam? Is there something that you or the guys at the shop are like, man, we got to hit this number or we got to hit this horsepower?
I think long term, we would love this. We'd love to see it make 800 on the dyno Mustang.
Yeah,
I mean, which would be aggressive, but I think with the current setup, it's more than capable. I'd love to see make Tyler's 62 millimeter make 800 horsepower, which I don't think you could do with an Evo X. But when you take in drivetrain loss and everything in a rear wheel drive car, like I think it's gonna get close. It might make 800. But and then once I start making that 800, I'd love to push this thing into the 8s. I mean,
Hell yeah.
once we get the short track figured out, I mean, this thing's gonna start going fast. And I mean, this thing at 160 mile an hour should go deep 8s.
Does that make you excited or kind of scared? Like, man, this is crazy in such a short little chassis.
The answer is yes. Yes to all of the above. It feels super stable, but I mean, at 146, it felt great, and the car wasn't perfectly set up yet. So I think it's all about just getting the setup done right. I mean, I've talked to the second fastest Miata in the world that's still running an IRS in it, and I mean, that's a turbo LS car, and he's at 175 mile an hour, and I've never seen that thing get upset anywhere near the back half of the tracker.
This might be a dumb question, but can the LS Miatas have hoods on?
Yes. Okay. So I don't think it's so the LS is really a small motor. Like it's big, but it's small.
Yep.
Now stuffing a turbo in there gets a little tricky, but I mean, like I said, man, you could put whatever you want in a Miata. We did so many Ford motors working at Exigent, and I mean, it's a smaller cubic inch, but they're just big motors.
Right.
And it's all about the overhead cam and whatnot. Like that just all makes everything big.
Right. Makes it so wide.
Yeah.
So what events can we go out and see this crazy 4B11 Miata in action in 2024?
So for autocross, we want to make every local autocross I can possible. They're drag events. Probably we want to hit up the Cincy Street Nights event stuff. Probably we'd love to get the street car takeover with it. I think we've looked at some classing. I think it fits pretty good, and there's a couple in there we thought about. But obviously we got to get back to the shootout. I mean, we surprised some people with having this wild car last year. Well, next year we want to surprise people with how good it does.
Right. With the numbers.
Not just be different.
That's kind of like, I don't know who it is that has the 4G63 swapped Evo 10. I feel like when people first saw it, they're like, oh, man, that's different. And then he never made a pass, as far as I know, and then it died off really fast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, heck, like, let's start going the other direction. Start putting 4Bs and Evo 8s and 9s.
Didn't somebody do that just recently?
I think I have seen it, but once again, I think it's the same kind of situation. I think they put it in there, and now they just have the world's most reliable Evo 8 instead of making some bets. But
that's what you got to do sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I would love to start seeing some fast 8s with a 4B
for sure. So, Adam, where can people find and follow you and see some pictures of this wild setup online?
So, I'm on Facebook. I'm just Adam Austin. I'm sure there's anybody that's listening to this probably has some friends attached to me somehow or another. Just Adam Austin. Instagram, it's aaustin00. And then I'm trying to get into the TikTok game.
Yep.
I'm just Adam Exigent Solutions. No space, no ads, no nothing. Just Adam Exigent Solutions. I'm trying to make some content on there every now and again.
Cool. Well, Adam, is there anybody that you want to give a shout out or a thanks to for helping you get where you are, help getting the car where it is?
Yeah, man. I mean, the guys at Exigent Solutions, Ryan and Glenn. I mean, none of this would have been possible. I mean, Glenn especially. I mean, we wired that whole car, and I mean, that man's got way too much on his plate, but he makes it all possible. Tyler Gennari for hooking us up with this rowdy little turbo. Steve at X Clutch for making it easy to get a clutch put together for us. Nick at M-Tron, which I feel we didn't even talk about M-Tron. I mean, that car is absolutely as good as it is because of that M-Tron. But Nick helped us make it all work easier. I mean,
hell yeah.
We always joke that's Glenn's boyfriend on the other side. So can't get him away from him. But bunch of fabricators helped us out. Scott at Arc Enemy, Darren at DI Fab, local guy Nick at Huffman Metals. I mean, they've got from my roll cage to exhaust manifold to all the other tubings. Helped making my dashboard quick disconnect. Those guys helped us put it all together. And then finally, I couldn't done any of this without my wife. She's put up with a lot through all of this and made it all possible. I don't know anybody that's married that's doing racing that doesn't have somebody good standing behind them.
Yeah, for sure. That or they're fighting a lot behind closed doors.
Right. Yeah. There's something going on. Nobody's telling anybody, but yeah, she makes it a little easier.
All right, well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on here and telling your story and telling the story of the little Miata that could. And I cannot wait to see some updates from this thing. Just seeing it in action is so cool. I love. Did you run the big wing at the autocross for the shootout?
So I did. So it's got a Blackbird Fabworks wing that's like a NASCAR style. We just made some fancy little rods that we put on it, so I can either run it straight up and down for autocross, or we put the different rods on it and lays it perfectly flat for drag racing.
Oh,
so
man.
It's a little double duty situation.
That's awesome. This thing, you have to see this thing in action. I know the pictures look great, and they probably do it pretty good justice, but you need to see this thing in action. It's so cool.
Man.
All right, Adam. Well, hopefully I'll see you at the track soon, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.